Firstly, I would say my office doesn't have the biggest responsibility to ensure public accountability. It is a multi-sectoral job and it is a multi-agency responsibility. We have, though, a huge responsibility, and that was confirmed by the Supreme Court of Appeal in the case of the public protector versus mail and guardian. Because the other pillars of accountability include the judiciary, which is quite complex and time-consuming, and Parliament, which often is overtaken by political interest. It's the nature of the job of a public protector that at times, yes, it does feel like a lonely job, because unlike judges, you don't have colleagues with whom you can discuss matters and understand things and make sense of things that don't make sense. But fortunately, I don't feel that alone, because I have a team that owns the journey from production to finally defending the decisions we've made. And there's so much solidarity and there's so much collegiality among us. Firstly is to understand that I am not made by Parliament. I occupy an office that is created by the Constitution, and my responsibility transcends what Parliament thinks. I always have to do what I think the Constitution requires me to do and what is required to protect the public. The public protector is there to protect the public, and it was the understanding of the architects of our democracy that protecting the public may be sometimes against politics of the day, may be sometimes against maladministration, and may be against unethical conduct. And former President Mandela made this point very clearly, that even the most benevolent of governments have within them the propensity for human failings. Hence, this institution, the courts and others were created to address those weaknesses or those human failings. That's true. The public protector's work is primarily to deal with administrative injustices, and those are cases that we refer to as Gogo Dlamini cases, the most vulnerable in society, the least able to hold government accountable, because government bureaucracy is a very strong institution. Government has money, has time, and has human resources to back whatever decision it has made, and often the little person is all by themselves. They don't have the money, they don't have the time. This institution strikes a balance, but it's also working in favor of government, because by ensuring that government is not a victim of its own excesses, we create ongoing dialogue between government and the people, and that strengthens constitutional democracy. And kinds of cases we deal with start from the smallest to the most complex. We give people their dignity in that somebody who has been fired or dismissed unfairly, such as whistleblowers, we intervene, we deal with those cases, we mediate sometimes, we adjudicate at times, and we make sure that if they were wrongfully fired, they get their job back. People who are owed money, a lot of social security issues, UIF, workers' compensation, government pension funds, people are often not paid on time, or never paid at all, or they are paid amounts that are less than what they deserve. And we adjudicate those matters or conciliate those matters and make sure that they get their monies. And we also deal with people who are owed money by the state as business people. And often by the time we come in or by the time they come to us, they've lost everything. Their business is insolvent, employees, multiple employees have lost their jobs, and we come in, we conciliate. Usually those are resolved through conciliation, and government sees the problem and pays. It's very few of those that end up resulting in reports where we then end up having to force government to remedy the injustice that they have caused. But even the cases that don't involve Gogo Dlaminis, the cases that involve abuse of public funds or improper enrichment are extremely important, because public funds are limited. And if they are used for wrong purposes, there won't be enough money to advance social justice, to ensure there's money for education, there's money for health, and there's money for housing and other things that are promised by the Constitution. So these things complement each other. Social, when we advance administrative justice, that ensures that there's direct justice for people. But when we also use administrative law, so to speak, to ensure that we curb excesses in the use of funds and just abuse of power in the public sector, that too indirectly gives people justice. And not by a long shot. Our budget is far too little to deal with the work. Just looking at the number of institutions we oversee, more than 1,200 institutions. We have funded posts that are 322. So already the ratio is uneven. Even if we're to say one person for one institution we oversee, there won't be enough. But you must also remember that within that staff, there's also those who are doing support work and those who are doing investigations. At the very least, if we had the same number of investigators as the number of institutions we oversee, that would be a good starting point. We have more than 166 cases that are over the year that are sitting. A lot is suffering. Firstly, we battle to strike a balance between rigor and speed, because we promise people prompt justice, including remedial action. But that requires that we're thorough in our work and we are fast so that we can deal with the problem whilst it's still hot. But the cases that we haven't dealt with, the situation gets worse. For example, we have investigations that we're supposed to have dealt with in Petro SA. Look at what's happening there. Telkom, Eskom, Medupi, the nuclear energy issue that is currently being viewed as a potential risk. If we had had the opportunity to investigate those things within 6 months each, we would know by this time what went wrong, even if we can't remedy too much of what went wrong then, but we would then set up a new system that makes sure that we don't repeat the same risks. My children, my family, I talk to my children, and we don't talk politics, we don't talk maladministration, we talk about anything and everything. My staff itself, during the office, that is part of distressing. At home, we even play simple games such as Monopoly, chess, and card games. They just keep us distressed. And all by myself, I read a lot of spiritual things, and I pray, I meditate, and I exercise. My guilty pleasure, I would say that social media, I probably use it a little bit more than I should. Well, in the early hours of the morning, I could go on for about 2 hours, and that usually is supposed to be my precious time for report writing and editing. That is between 3 and 5 a.m. I do sleep, and I do need sleep, but I'm good with about 5 hours.